Today I'll be taking a look at the Garen K656 Pro, a gaming orientated keyboard from Redragon. Thanks to Redragon for sending this one over for a review. Check out the description below where you'll find a discount code for the Redragon website. So I must admit feeling a little out of my area of expertise on this one, both because it's a very gaming centric keyboard and because it's a keyboard named after a League of Legends warrior, which I know absolutely nothing about. That said, I'll do my best and will try to offer you something other reviews haven't and actually look to open it up and do some mods on it. Before that, let's get the all important stock typing test done. Next we're into first impressions based on a typing test and an inspection of the keyboard. The stock typing test is pretty solid. I'll give it a 7 out of 10 at this price point, as we're halfway through 2023 and the bar for stock out the box typing sound and feel is really high in the budget keyboard arena. The reasons for the 7 is first of all that there is some nasty stabilizer rattle, especially on the spacebar, and because there's not really enough dampening in there to tidy up the sound profile, which is a must have for me in plastic chassis budget keyboards. On the plus side, the switches have no spring ping and sound and feel like they're factory lubed. The layout is pretty much just a standard 1800 compact layout, also known as the compact full layout, so if a TKL is a full-size keyboard with the numpad section sliced off, the 1800 compact layout is a full-size keyboard with the block of 6 navigation keys sliced out of the middle, and the rest of the keyboard just smooshed together to give it this smaller footprint. I really like the translucent blue case, which lets out some really nice RGB underglow. Speaking of RGB, you get a bunch of effects and all the usual adjustments using function plus key combinations. I think the white on blue gradient keycaps finish the aesthetic off really nicely. I like the Redragon logo top left with the bright red LEDs below it showing battery level on a scale of 1 to 4. The lock lights next to the numpad are also these old school bright red LEDs, which I really like. This is a wireless keyboard with both Bluetooth and 2.4 GHz wireless. The mode switch is top left on the side, which is cool, but my switch is a bit tight to operate, which is not so cool. It won't slide if you just place your finger on the switch and try to slide it, which it should do, and this is due to the friction it creates between the switch and the case. You actually have to put your finger on the side of the switch to move it. The 3 Bluetooth connections work great using the function plus 1 through 3 key combinations, 2.4 GHz is function plus 4, and you switch OS mode between Windows and Mac using function W and function A respectively. Looking at the bottom, you can see there are 2 sets of white angle adjusting legs for 3 typing angle options, and the rubber feet and the 2.4 GHz wireless receiver are also in white, carrying on the very nice white on blue aesthetic. The USB-C port is under the keyboard in this recess, with channels running left and right giving you cable routing options out of the center, right or left of the keyboard depending on your desk setup. So first impressions are good, especially considering the price tag of $75 and given that this one is more gaming orientated than typer or modder orientated. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10 in terms of out of the box fully assembled quality for the price. The reason I added the caveat of it being for gamers is because this is a tray mount keyboard which generally won't be top of the list for the typers out there, and it also doesn't look like it was made with modders in mind, as I can see the case screws are underneath the rubber feet and there are clips holding the case together. That said, I'm going to disassemble it to show you how it comes apart and to advise on whether I recommend taking it apart. First up, I need to remove the keycaps, take out the switches and take out the stabilizers. You could shortcut this step and take off only the keycaps needed to get to the tray mount screws which pass down through the plate, but I'm taking them all out because I want to completely disassemble the keyboard, including the plate and PCB assembly. Next, we need to remove the top case to get to all the tray mount screws and allow for removal of the PCB and plate assembly. Unfortunately, this involves both screws and clips. First, you need to remove the rubber feet to get to the case screws underneath, which is a bummer because you always lose some of the stickiness when doing this. With all 6 case screws out, you need to carefully unclip the top case. You need to unclip it on the top and bottom edges, and you need to release the 2 clips under the strip of plastic between the function row and alphas. Use a plastic lever to do this so as you don't damage the case. With the top case off, you remove the tray mount screws to release the plate and PCB assembly from the bottom case, then tilt up the plate and PCB, unplug the daughter board wire, and remove the plate and PCB assembly from the case. Finally, I want to take apart the plate and PCB assembly, and on this keyboard they use clips instead of screws. A gentle pull on the PCB from underneath and the clips release from the plate, allowing me to separate the plate foam and the PCB. And that's it disassembled into its component parts. I would rate ease of disassembly on this one as 3 out of 10. Ease of disassembly isn't so much how easy it is to get apart, but represents how well the keyboard was made with disassembly in mind, which affects how likely you are to get it apart and put it back together without damaging anything. The reasons it's marked down are because clips holding the case together automatically drop it down to a 5. If it's made with disassembly in mind, it should be case screws only. I can see that some of the clips have whitened in areas, meaning even though I used a lever, I've put force through the clips to disengage them, so I was close to breaking them. Then the screws being concealed under the rubber feet takes it down to a 3. Basically, I don't recommend taking this one apart. However, please bear in mind that Redragon probably meant for this keyboard not to be taken apart, so this is not a score on the quality or performance of the keyboard, just an observation on how easy it is to get apart without damage. With it apart, I can see the quality of the components and what can be done in terms of mods. In terms of some build highlights, first is the switches. I took 2 apart to check out the factory lube job and was pleasantly surprised. The lube is limited to the rails only, which you want on tactiles. They haven't been over lubed, and the lube job is tidy and consistent across the 2 switches I checked. Second is that I was worried when I saw the white plate. White plates on budget keyboards often means aluminium with a bad paint job, and that means scratching the plate while hot swapping switches. I was happy this turned out to be a heavy and very well painted, I want to say powder coated, steel plate which doesn't scratch while hot swapping. Third, there is plate dampening in the form of EVA foam, which is good. That will reduce the hollow sound profile this keyboard would otherwise have. On to some negatives, and the first is the mount. I certainly don't mind a few tray mounts in my collection on some premium builds, but I prefer to see gasket mounts in budget keyboards. It provides a bit of isolation from the plastic case and makes for a nicer typing sound and feel. Second is the keycaps. Almost all the keycaps are nice with really consistent and sharp legends, but on mine the letter B keycap is badly overshot with the blue bleeding onto the legend. Also, the I on the Windows key is messed up. It looks like it's a smaller font than the W and the N lettering next to it, and smaller than the I on the shift keys. Third is the fact that this only comes with plate foam. It's good to have the plate foam as it could have come with no dampening, but I would have liked to have seen a switch sheet on this one. I understand not running case dampening as the RGB underglow is a feature, but it could do with a switch sheet, especially given it's not the easiest to get apart for mods. Finally, the stabilizer lube job was unusual. I can see they've lubed the stems with oil, which is good as you hardly ever see lubed stems on factory lube stabs, but they didn't apply nearly enough lube to the wires, which is why the spacebar rattle is so prominent. On the build quality, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 compared to others at this price point. That brings me on to the rebuild and mods. On this one, I'm going to apply a decent lube job to the stabilizers, which only requires lubing the wires with dielectric grease as the outside of the stems are already lubed with the oil. Next, I'm going to PE foam mod this one in the absence of the switch sheet. It's a really quick and simple mod which I'm using to quieten this one down more than anything, as it's on the loud side when stock. Finally, after putting the plate and PCB together with the PE foam in place, I applied the tape mod. I did this more to give it that tapey sound for you to hear, and to compare it to no tape on the stock typing test. It's a great mod for budget keyboards if you like that tapey sound. With that done, I can reassemble, so we plug the daughter board back into the PCB, land the plate and PCB assembly in the case, and secure it with the tray mount screws. Then install the top case by clipping it into place before securing it with the case screws, sticking the feet back on after the screws are in. Then it's in with the stabilizers, in with the switches, and on with the keycaps, and we're ready for the modded typing test. I think the keyboard sounds much nicer with the mods, but I actually broke the mode switch during reassembly because the plastic mode switch on the case wasn't perfectly lined up with the switch on the PCB when I landed it back in the bottom case. I've lost Bluetooth mode but still have wired and 2.4 GHz mode. This only reinforces my view from before, which is that it isn't worth taking this one apart. I definitely could have avoided the damaged switch with a bit more care and attention, and I for sure prefer the sound profile with the mods, but I don't think the risk is worth the reward. It doesn't sound so much better that it's worth risking damage. If you want to properly mod, I suggest getting a Keychron V series, which is designed for user disassembly. That said, it's a nice looking wireless keyboard with a solid stock typing sound and nice RGB. The stabilizers are plate mounted so you can remove those for lubing without disassembly, and the switches are factory lubed so it's easy to get it to a good place on the typing front without taking the case apart. So my rating on this reverts back to the stock typing tests, first impressions and value for money at around 8 out of 10 for the more gamer orientated users at this price point. For the typers and modders out there like me, this isn't going to be the keyboard for most of you. I won't rate it on that front as custom keyboard enthusiasts and modders aren't really the target audience for this one, so it's not really fair. And that's it. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.